Okay, now I'm going to show you how the brushes work, which is an extremely important part of Photoshop if you're going to be painting a lot. And one thing that's different on my system now is I have a Wacom tablet plugged in. So now I can show you how pressure sensitivity works if you have a tablet available. Wacom is not the only company that makes tablets, but in my opinion, in my use, they've been the best. And they're designed specifically for Photoshop. So there's a lot you can do with them. I just have a simple uh, file loaded in here. Put file new, and it's just an 8 by 10 resolution 300 RGB color with a white background. So just the same as we had last time. And now I'm going to right mouse click and show you the brushes, which look a little bit different than they did last time I showed you the brushes. And that's because now with the tablet plugged in, you can see the pressure sensitivity where it has sort of this wave where it's really small, gets thicker, and then smaller on the other end. And that's just pretty much that changes once you have a tablet plugged into your system. And we can go through all of these different brushes. We also have these are the ones we had before, just our basic ones. But pretty much my default now, since I have the tablet plugged in, are these pressure sensitive ones. So let's go ahead and just select a basic brush here. And if you don't have a tablet, you can still work along with this. Just your pressure sensitivity won't work. Okay, so I'm gonna move this off to the side, and I'm gonna show our brushes panel. Now, in the brushes panel, we can edit any one of these brushes with a number of different options. We can also select our brushes, and if you have not loaded in the other brushes that come with Photoshop, you can easily do that by clicking on the top right here, and then we can select all of these brushes on the bottom down here. And if you want to add, let's say, natural brushes 2, select Append. And if you select Append, what it'll do is add that to your current library of brushes. If you just want to use specific brushes, you can easily do that just by clicking OK, and it'll delete all of your brushes loaded in except the ones you are loading, which is the natural brushes 2. I'm going to hit cancel just because I've already got all these loaded in. But right now I'm going to right mouse click, make this diameter just a little bit larger, and I can just start painting. And as you can see with the pressure sensitivity, I can just lightly touch it and then hold down a little harder to get a thicker flow, and then lightly touch it, and you kind of get the idea how the pressure sensitivity works. And that's all based on the pen I'm using on my tablet. So you can go in and just kind of draw things out, and it's pretty easy to use. But let's go back to our brushes. And there's a lot we can do. We can enable scattering if we wanted to. And right now shape dynamics is on because I am using the pen pressure, which we have right here. We can also use other different things here. We can use the stylus wheel, rotation, and the pen tilt, which will also affect it, fade, and there's lots of different options there. I could also turn off shape dynamics, and now we have just a standard brush that you'll normally have if you just have a mouse on your system. If not, we want to turn on shape dynamics. We also have scattering, and you can see the preview of our brush down here. Any edit that we do, it will show up on the bottom right here. So we can get some very interesting looking brushes by adjusting these different settings. And now I'm going to go ahead and paint that in, and I'm going to use a different color so that we can see that against that red. You can see that's a very interesting looking brush that we're using by scattering, and it just reacts however we want it to. Go back to the brushes panel, and I can also add a texture to it. And all of these different options you can all edit. Click off here, and we can see we can adjust the scale of our texture, texture each tip, which mode we want to use, which is a blending mode, multiply, subtract, darken, overlay, color dodge, color burn. And for blending modes, really the best way to see which one you need is just kind of give it a try and see which one works, undo if necessary. We can also adjust the depth, the minimum depth, and the jitter of the depth. We also have different controls, which is pen pressure, so I can lightly touch or push down really hard, and we get a much larger brush here. I'll change this to another color so we can see this again. And right now I'm just lightly touching, and then I can push down harder and it gets bigger. So that's with the advantage of having a pen, is you can do a little bit extra that way. Now let's go back and look at some of the other options. We can also do a dual brush. So in other words, we can add another brush, sort of subtracting from the other brush. So we still have our one brush, but then we can subtract or add to it with another brush. That's dual brush. There's also color dynamics, so we can change hue jitter. So in other words, it changes color as you're drawing. And I'm not sure if this will actually show up right now because of the type of brush I'm using in the screen. It's all just kind of turning white right now. But if you play around with that, you can see that you can actually change your color, the hue jitter, because hue is pretty much your color. So you can change that as you move throughout. There's also other dynamics, where we can do an opacity jitter, a flow jitter, and these are all linked to the pen pressure at this current point. But we can also do fade, like I said, pen tilt, stylus wheel, rotation. There's also other options we have on the bottom here. We can add noise, and these ones do not have any specific settings. It's just presets. So we could add noise to it, wet edges, so you can see that showing up, airbrush, whether you want to use airbrush mode or not, smoothing, and protect texture. Now, airbrush mode mostly works just like a real airbrush. The longer you leave the brush there, the darker the color will get. If that is off, no matter how many times you go over the same area while you're still clicking, it will be the same darkness. But with airbrush on, the longer you keep your brush in the same place, you actually get a darker texture. So that's airbrush, and airbrush is available for a lot of the different tools within Photoshop. But then we can also adjust our brush tip within here, so we can select whether we want to use shapes or not. And since I have all of the brushes loaded into the library already, I can select from all of these different shapes and gets lots of different types of effects for painting. And you can see all the different options, and these are applying to what I already have in here. I'm just changing the shape of the brush. So if you really want to play around painting, just go through the brushes panel, and there's a lot you can do with it, and just kind of play around to learn. The best way to really learn it is just to go through and try everything out. Just click on everything and just play around with it. And you don't have to really worry about editing in any of the presets. So you can always go back and select one of the presets maybe you were working with earlier, and then you've still got that option. Another thing you'll notice, just while we're actually working on a document, if you right mouse click while you have the brush tool up, we can adjust the diameter of the brush. We can also adjust the hardness, which is pretty much the softness area around the brush. So if I set a hardness to 100%, it's going to be extremely harsh on the edges. If I go back and change that hardness to, let's say, 0%, and look at that right next to the other one, you'll see that it's very soft on the edges. So you can do that right away, changing there without having to use the brush modes or any of the brush dynamics or anything in there. So we can just do quick edits of whatever presets we have in here. And you can also make your own brushes and then just save them within that panel. So as you can see, we can create a new preset from this brush. So if we design a brush, we can right mouse click on the document, click this button, and it will give us the ability to save. So there's a lot you can do with those brushes and lots with the dynamics. So if you're going to be painting a lot in Photoshop, it's something to definitely know.